fingers on our wire armatures. You probably already know that the hands can be really difficult, whether it's drawing or sculpting, but having a wire armature in place ahead of time will make our job a lot easier. If you haven't seen the lesson on building wire armatures for sculpture, you can check that out here. And if you want a more in-depth look at the structure of the hand, check out the videos on how to draw the hand from the anatomy course. Because our armatures are made using cranial units, we will first want to understand how the hand fits into the cranial unit system. The distance from the bottom of the wrist to the top of the middle finger is about 1 1/4 cranial units. And the width of the palm from side to side, not including the thumb, is about 1/2 of 1 cranial unit. When sculpting, the thumb is often considered as a separate entity from the rest of the hand because it originates at the wrist and tends to follow a different gesture than the palm and the fingers. It is also angled differently than the rest of the fingers. Opposable thumbs, am I right? Let's look at the arm of our armature that we built in a previous lesson. Remember that the distance from the shoulder to the elbow is 2 cranial units. And then the distance from the elbow to the end of the loop is also 2 units. The loop at the end of the forearm represents the palm of the hand, starting at the wrist and ending where the fingers begin. So this loop should be about 1/2 a unit long and 1/2 a unit wide. Okay, now that we have a better idea of the proportions of the hand, let's build it out with wire. For this armature, we're going to be using 1 1/2 inches as 1 cranial unit, making the armature 18 inches tall. For the armature, we used 14 gauge wire, but for the hands, we're going to use a thinner 20 gauge wire. To start off, we will cut 5 lengths of wire that are each 2.5 units. We will then put the wires together and measure out 1 2/3 cranial units and make a twist just below this point for about 1/3 of a unit. This will represent the wrist where the hand begins. We will then connect the hand to the armature. We should align the spot where the twist begins with where the wrist is on the armature. Remember, this should be at the base of the loop of the palm, which should be 1/2 a unit from the end of the loop. We can then use the excess wire at the end near the elbow to wrap around the forearm to secure it in place. We may also want to wrap a small bit of wire around the wrist to secure that in place. To make the wires of the thumb and fingers more secure, we can wrap them once around the wire that makes up the loop of the palm and then pull them tight. It may be necessary to reshape the loop of the palm so that the fingers are spaced far enough apart. Remember that the thumb begins at the wrist and the other fingers will begin at the end of the loop of the palm. Once we've got the wires for the fingers in place, we will then need to cut them to the correct length. The thumb starts at the wrist and is about 2/3 of 1 cranial unit in length. The pointer finger should extend